Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome once again to Logical Talk session number 19th today. And okay, great. As we are expecting more participants to join us, let me, try and use this next couple of minutes by the time more participants join to do our customary introduction about the Lawbit, and we will also introduce our speakers for today. Uh, you all know, I am sure by now, it's by heart by for you that what we exactly do. We offer SaaS-based risk and regulatory compliance management solution for enterprises. Our solutions are integrated with the global regulatory intelligence, and we also track the regulatory changes on a real-time basis and ensure that they are available with our users as and when the changes are happening, along with the understanding about how those changes are impacting the compliance framework which you are responsible for. Uh, Today, we also offer, apart from our flagship product, which is called as GCMS Global Compliance Management Solution, other technology solutions like legal matter management, which is primarily a litigation, come notice, come expense, legal expense management software. Uh, we have an enterprise risk and controls management software we call ERMS, and we also offer different service lines which helps you on make the best use of these solutions and service softwares from us, which includes our compliance health checks, which is primarily an audit services for your compliances, your managed support services, and your business impact assessments. Uh, Today we are serving clients in more than 70 plus countries, and we are serving more than 350 plus entities globally, 2,500 plus. And we have a team of 80 plus legal and technical professionals who are working on the background to help you uh, with these services. I think let's quickly move to the agenda of the discussion today and with an introduction to our speakers. As you can see, Satyajit and Arvind already here. And let me introduce and welcome both of them for the discussion today. Satyajit, hi, and very warm welcome to this session today. Okay, Satyajit is is a very well known face in the legal fraternity. I'm sure many of you who joined here would have already heard him, seen him in some of the discussions. He's a lawyer and by profession with 21 plus years of experience, both as an in-house and as well as from a on the other side of the table while he was working with the Big Four and he was running a legal practice as well. And he is currently the head of legal for India and is also managing the CSR operations for EXL globally. EXL, I don't need to introduce to any of you. It's a Nasdaq listed data and digital service company, which is providing a mix of GCC and client-facing delivery. It's a very well-known name in this industry. I think known very well for some of the standards which company has set in terms of the processes and the deliverables. Uh, he is also he's I'm sure you are aware that with this kind of experience he comes in, he has worked on the complete range of the legal services and the legal domain. Uh, Prior to this, he has also worked in the media sector, spent a lot of time with Star, and Satyajit, welcome here. And looking forward to hearing your thoughts on many of the subjects which we are going to touch upon today.
Thank you, Jayant. I believe, of course, that a lot of what you've said is, probably over the top, but thank you so much for your kind welcome. And of course, I must remark that I think Jayant was one of the, you know, and Lawbit has been one of the, I mean, while we don't directly work with them, and I think I can say it independently, objectively, that they are one of the best in the business.
Thank you, Satyajit. I also have my friend Arvind. Arvind, very warm welcome. I think we've been discussing to have you on, on this panel for a long time. Finally, we could make it happen this time. And Arvind, is heading the legal and compliance for Musk GSC for India, China, and Philippines operation, and not just these countries is helping uh, the GSC operations across the globe as well. Arvind is a qualified company secretary and comes with more than 39 and a lawyer by profession and comes with more than 16 plus years experience as an in-house counsel and the company secretary. His overall experience spans across multiple uh, industries uh, from a real estate to to manufacturing and GCC, and within GCC also one side is Wells Fargo and the side is um, your Must GAC. I think that's a quite a uh, overwhelming experience. And Arvind, there are a lot of things which we are definitely looking forward to learn from you. And I have always loved interacting with Arvind on various topics. His experience, his knowledges, and his interest towards the business and the overall the uh, geopolitics and the global sides is quite great. And I'm sure those things will reflect in our today's discussion also. Arvind, looking forward to hear.
Thank you, Jayant, for your kind introduction. Yes, looking forward for this wonderful session. Thank you again, and welcome to Satyajit as well. Yeah.
And I think now we have quite a lot of participants. I think let's quickly jump on with our agenda today. Once we are going to quickly touch upon what is the evolution of GCCs in India. Talking a little about the the crucial stories, and we will also touch a little bit upon the Karnataka GCC policy, which we all are aware of, the type of challenges and the landscape of compliance which GCCs are supposed to comply with. We'll touch very briefly more the applicable laws and navigating the complex legal landscape, how to strategize, what the kind of challenges and all. And in between, there have been a lot of queries which have come from the users. We will try and touch upon on those also. And as we have always followed the format. In case you have any query, please feel free to keep writing to us on the chat box here, which is active and live right now. So that if in case you have any specific query on the particular slides, we will try and address that as we were talking. So this discussion is going to be more of interactive. The slides show one of our slides are you showing, seeing more for reference purpose, and let's get going. Very quickly, briefly, you all who are sitting here today are aware of it. But one definitely point which I want to talk about is one is the early stages. While in normal discussion, we all talk about GCC is a new thing in India. The IT sector is a new age thing. But look at it. This is something which is here for long. The first GCC you can say in true sense was established in 1985. I was born in 1980s, so many of us were not even born when the first GCC was set up in India. Um, uh, it's a very old uh, setup. It's in the maturity and the growth stage, and I would say it's across. It has seen one level of slump in India, and it is on to the the next level of growth stage, which is what makes it very interesting to have a discussion on that and how and what kind of the challenges are there in the GCC space right now. From 1985 when Texas Instruments set up their GCC in India, from there onwards to phase which was a growth and expansion stage in 2000s to transformation and innovation stage. So now this was a stage when the real transformation was happening. People were started looking beyond what can happen in the GCCs in India. Can we just look at having my call center in India? Can I do beyond it? And what are the different things we can do? I think from there onwards in 2010s and 2020s, this sector has truly evolved. And as we are talking right now, there are a lot of interesting discussions. And I think all of us who are reading Economic Times or any business newspaper in the morning, we know that it's almost every day you are hearing you're reading something about GCC. It was not a common thing a few years back. GCC was seen okay as a sector, but not so important sector. We are today hearing every minister talking about GCC. We've seen Karnataka coming with the GCC policy, and I think Karnataka is the first one. It's not going to stop with Karnataka. Every other country, a state is trying to look at getting a pie of it. EY has very recently come up with a report which says, sorry, it was KPMG, I believe. They've recently come up with a report which says by 2030 GCC can contribute to almost like a 1% of GDP, which is phenomenally high in terms of the contribution to any GDP. And GDP like India, which is going to be third largest economy in the world. So this impact and the contribution and to the overall economy and the lifestyles is phenomenal in GCC. Okay, with this number, I'm going to hand over to both Arvind and Satyajit. 1700 plus GCCs, 2150 is what is expected by 2030. But if I talk about the Karnataka policy, they themselves want a complete pie of it. They want 500 more GCCs to come by 2030. I think these numbers may even go beyond what is being projected by some of the reports of NESCOM, Zenobori, NSR. 2.6 million people already engaged, and we are seeing 71,000 plus talent engaged in GCCs in tier 2 cities. If you look at an India map, you see NCR contributing 40%, Bangalore contributing 35%. The lion's share is in with Bangalore itself. To Hyderabad 17%, and Mumbai, Pune combining 20%. But there is there's also something like a tier 2 cities which are also contributing around 5%. I see this becoming a next level of a growth story, and those who know me, I am very, very bullish about this growth story coming from the tier 2 cities, because we ourselves have invested in a tier 2 city like a Jaipur. I feel this growth story is going to spread beyond these 5 cities, 6 cities which we are talking about right now, to the next level of cities. And I think this may truly change the landscape. And we are also seeing a lot of Indian companies now trying to move their knowledge hubs to smaller cities, maybe cities which we never thought could contribute or could serve our global clients because of the language barriers, because of whatever, the knowledge barriers and all. Connectivity is never a problem today in any of the cities in India. I think this growth story is going to change very differently. I mean, then Satyajit, I want to hear your thoughts, because we've been talking, I think, for many, many years, and I've seen specifically many companies, they started investing in the tier 2 cities almost like 10 years back, yet not much of a growth has been seen. How are you seeing this story unfolding from here onwards?
Arvind,
sure.
Where do you go? I'll follow.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, before I start off, all views that I express are my personal. It doesn't represent that of my current or any past employers. Yeah, to the question on tier 2 cities expansion, I think the intent from the government side is always there, right? If you view it from that point to start off with, whether it is the central government or the respective state governments. For instance, Tamil Nadu has a policy for compensating expansion in Tamil Nadu outside of Chennai. So basically what they're looking at is tier 2 and tier 3 cities inside of Tamil Nadu. If the GCC is expanding, then they will provide some benefits in by way of compensating the payroll share would be compensated, or some other benefits around electricity duties and things like that. So there is definitely an intent coming from the government, which is very promising to see. And the other thing is, from a company side, now from a corporate side as well, the corporates are now starting to look at areas where they can get talent, and it's not just limited to metro or metropolitan cities, like the chart here shows, but also expanding to other regions where they can get cheaper real estate as well as quality talent. So I think that's a great start, and this is going to evolve and proliferate further in the coming years because of the focus of the state governments like the Karnataka GCC policy that we spoke of, and many states would follow suit because they don't want to lose out on this growth, and which is very promising, not just from a corporate point of view but also from a job aspirant point of view, because they don't have to shift out from their hometown and travel to the major cities, but they can work basically from the comfort of their hometown and then still be associated with this growth journey.
Right. So, am I audible?
Yes,
Yes.
you are.
Yeah. Thanks. So, I mean, I think obviously every state has tried, and I think thanks Arvind for I think sharing the Tamil Nadu story, and of course, and I think we may probably be talking about the Karnataka policy as well. But I think the probably, I mean, in my mind, the reason, I mean, there are multiple challenges which I guess the GCCs per se also face. While of course the story has been, very good. That's why we are talking about it, and I think we are looking at obviously this continuing. And I think GCCs have actually, through the ups and downs of I guess the global economy, more or less retained this team and sort of carried on. But I think definitely, you know, there are issues. Of example, we've also had our own experiments with a tier two city, and some of it has been positive, and some of it I would say has been otherwise. There are different reasons. I think sometimes the propensity for employers to treat every location as the same, right? And sort of not realize that look, locationally the talent is different, the way you have to treat them is different. Uh, you know the probably the approach in terms of hiring, the approach in terms of what compensation you offer, etc., is different. So I think there are multiple factors. Probably, many of them are non-regulatory, non-legal. So maybe I am not the best person to answer it. But practically, we have seen that some organizations, have done well in tier two cities, and some and probably quite a few have actually not done that well. So I think I would say it's probably and we will see far more growth in tier two cities in the future. I feel that 5% is a low number. We should probably see a larger number because obviously the availability of talent is there with, I think, the fact that, with the pandemic, the COVID, and a lot of people had moved back. So there is, and also there's an appreciation amongst, the talent of today that, there could be some benefit. They can, if they get a in terms of the similar opportunities sitting at home, why not? So I think there is definitely, uh, I feel the potential of growth in tier two cities is definitely there. And that would be even around, and even the governments also, as I think Arvind has also clarified, in even the states which are growing quite a bit, like Karnataka and other states, the growth has been in the larger cities. So I think they want to push it and they want to move it to the smaller cities as well. Back to you,
So then
Arvind.
you pointed, you said a very valid point. There have been some success stories, and there have been a lot of misses also when companies have looked at expanding in tier twos. But what's your perception? What's your, I would say, not perception, but what's your experience? Have companies given up on tier two cities, or they're still looking at, that maybe the timing was not right, and the right timing is coming, ahead of us, and they still go
Yeah, no,
back?
absolutely. I think a lot of them are definitely continuing. I think they're looking at cities like you mentioned, Jaipur. I think Arvind mentioned a few cities. There are companies which have even gone to Kolkata, and companies which have gone to other Vizag and various other cities as well. So, like Kolkata obviously is a city which I think a lot of people are a bit, people have trepidation in entering, considering, it's not been very, while it's not been actually unfriendly to IT. So there have been some IT companies which have been there. But I think in terms of the GCC space, sometimes I feel there's a mental block as well sometimes in looking at some of those cities. But I feel it's something which is, it could be, I mean, it takes some more time to scale up in those cities. and I feel that people need to, and organizations need to spend more time. So there are two, I mean, for me, there are two sides. One is, of course, the regulatory side, because every state has its own, could have its own regulatory complexity. So understanding the compliant landscape is important. And two is understanding, the talent, understanding maybe some of the soft aspects, like, where should they be located? What's a good, in terms of where is the talent placed? And also things like what is the right compensation to offer. It could be something which could make a difference. And of course, I'm ultimately just talking from my personal experience. I feel these um, sometimes aspects which are not considered very highly by organizations, but those could make the difference between success and failure.
And I think sometimes the cultural issues also do come to play, because if you go to a tier two city, and I'm talking something from my personal experience. A few days back ago, I was talking to someone in my relations also. So this girl, she was working in Chandigarh, and her parents said no to her job when she had to work in a graveyard shift. Now, if it's happening in Chandigarh, I'm sure it's not happening with one. I'm saying it's happening with many, because they don't allow the kids to even work in those shifts. I think that culture shift is also something which slowly would come in, and maybe because that's required. If you have to serve the global, you have to work with their timings.
Absolutely.
So let's. This is something which Arvind, I want to know your thoughts more close to your heart and your place.
Yeah, definitely. So no, it's great that Karnataka has come out with this policy for GCCs, and there is a compelling reason as well, right? Like Bangalore is one of the leading cities when it comes to the number of GCCs present in India, and the differences in the kind of varied GCCs that are present. So typically, when you think of it, it is mostly you think of GCCs as an IT enabled service kind of setup, but that has transitioned over a period of time, right? It is now focusing around research and development. So engineering and research and development is also a focus area for GCCs. There is semiconductor kind of business which are being carried out as a GCC setup. I've known a couple of them in Bangalore itself. There are my previous employer was also into chemical manufacturing, so we had R&D based on chemical manufacturing. So these are also operating in the GCC model, and I see that why Karnataka is taking this lead, because it wants to capitalize on this, needs to attract talent, needs to attract corporates coming in, investing into the city. And when we speak of the city, it's not just Bangalore. Even inside the Karnataka GCC policy, there is, I think, something called as Beyond Bangalore, a policy segment, wherein it kind of encourages you to invest outside of Bangalore's, like cities like Mysore or Belgaum or Kalburgi, including. So there are expansion which is going beyond Bangalore, and I feel that it's a right step. It's a step in the right direction, because one is the cities are also the urban infrastructure are also limited. So when you attract or encourage people to go outside of the cities, in one way you are kind of decongesting the city, so that the workforce would be split in the wider states rather than focused on one particular city. Plus, we also see the focus on not just the traditional setup of IT or AI or robotics, process automation, things like that, but also going into deep techs. Like, for instance, engineering I spoke of. There are focus around climate change as well coming into GCC. So there are people who would do some climate change assessment. Maybe you can take up in the other sessions as well. But then the focus is around how can you solve a larger problem sitting out of the GCCs. And I see that as a focus in these policies that are coming out, and which is very encouraging. And also, not to miss out on the nano GCCs. So it's not just bigger GCCs that have been set up, but also supporting nano smaller GCC setups to kind of establish and then grow from there. But yeah, I think it's very right step in the right direction, and I hope other states as well will come up with similar policies.
Right. No, in fact, on the GCC, in fact, when I also read the term for the first time, I was like, oh, great, that's at least the government is also taking a note that between 5 to 50 employees also is a GCC, and you can't
Yep,
you can't avoid them anymore.
correct.
So, your thoughts on this?
So no, absolutely. I mean, I was actually lucky to, I think there have been some precursors, and there have been some road shows which the Karnataka government and their team has also been doing. So I was lucky to attend one or two of them, and I think they've also done some work around, talking about this policy. I think sometimes policies come and nobody knows,
Yep,
right? And it's a policy for a sake of saying that, okay, we have done 100 days of government, 500 days of government, this is what we have done. But they've taken industry inputs, and they've actually, I think done a great job of, I feel, obviously everybody wants everything from a policy, but I think it ticks a lot of boxes. And I think the good thing, as Arvind also mentioned, was to take development and take this growth to outside Bangalore. And there are a lot of places in Karnataka which would benefit from it. I mean, they've spoken about creating innovation districts and all of that. I think you mentioned Mysore, Belgavi, and all of that. So I think there is a definite. Um, I think the focus is right. I think the focus is on, obviously, I mean, to be fair, they want. I mean, like your statistics pointed out, more than one third of the GCCs today are in Karnataka, are in Bangalore. They obviously want to continue with that growth. They want to divide, and they want to they want to balance out that growth in other parts of Karnataka. But I think also gives a great model for other states to follow, I think. So I think I'm sure other states will also come up with similar policies, and the states which have not done it so far. And I feel we should look, like you mentioned, very soon, maybe in 2, 3, 4 years, you will see these numbers will look, probably minuscule in front of what the actual numbers are.
Right. And one, I think, very important aspect, we when we perceive a GCC, we perceive it as somebody who has a lot of cash and splurging a lot of money everywhere. But for the first time, seeing the government is also talking about giving incentive, uh, which makes it very interesting, because I think somebody has really gone into it and understand the economics also. Because there was a time when we were losing out on some of the other APAC markets, in terms of our GCCs, because of the cost advantages.
yep,
So government is talking about moving to the tier 2 cities, so that your overall cost is reduced. Government is planning airports, and the number of airports have gone and double up in the last few years. So your connectivity is very good. There are international flights going from those cities. You're talking about rental reimbursements to GCCs operating outside of Bangalore, so which means
yep,
that substantial cost you're taking away from them. You're also giving them grants on electricity duty. We never thought government electricity duty can be a a motivational factor for someone. But I think these are very very forward-looking thoughts for anybody who will do a cost analysis to set up a GCC in India, and second is beyond these 5, 6 cities which we have traditionally seen taking the lion's share of GCC in India. Great. Now, when I was looking at actually the slide, so I was looking at, I said, Arvind, I'm going to look at your inputs on the extreme left, which is, or maybe extreme right, whichever way you want to look at, on the green one, and Satyajit, I'm going to look at your views specifically on the extreme right, or the blue one. Uh, it's one of my personal favorite slide. Interesting conversations I think can happen here, because one preconceived notion which I always hear about GCC, तो compliance का कोई challenge नहीं है. Straightforward है. It's not something which is governed by or very highly regulated entity. ITs पे छोड़ दे हम तो your number of compliance are lesser. But I want to hear your thoughts. Looking as to what is a typical GC's challenge when it comes to compliance beyond just the laws specific while running a GCC?
Yeah, so I think we have a slide on the legal aspects as well, but then maybe to start off with non-legal aspects, right? And when it comes to shared services, knowledge centers, or any of these innovation centers that we call of today, most of these are supporting some parent entity or a group entity, mostly abroad, and also a mix of Indian support as well. But then mostly it is to the parent companies either located in the Americas or in the Europe region or APA region like Australia and things like that. So one critical aspect is if you look at non-Indian law perspective is the parent entity, whichever sector they are in, like for instance, if you are in a banking sector or an insurance sector or a medical health sector, there are independent regulators that govern some operations of these parent entities, right? And when you're outsourcing these work, and these work are now being carried out from centers like GCCs in India, there needs to be a little bit of connection between both how the work has been handed over and also how these work are being executed, and the same level of from a compliance perspective, the US law perspective if you take, or a European law perspective, whatever is the rigor and measures and processes that have been set in place, the same kind of rigor is expected from a center like GCC in India. So it's not just the India law perspective that we are complying with, but also something which is beyond your jurisdiction, right? And so therefore, it's not a simple thing to be carried out to say that compliance wise it's fine, because it's not just, and also not just to say legal and compliance team is responsible for this, but also the executing delivery teams, because they also need to be able to understand and relate to whatever activities they are doing and how it is a compliant and a non-compliant. So it's not as simple as it sees from outside. There are multiple regulatory things, touch points, not just in India, but outside of India, and also policies like how global policies are there mandating certain way of conducting business or conducting certain activity. Those also have to be complied with. So therefore, it's a mix of policy plus legal plus jurisdictional issues that we need to juggle around.
Right.
But
Yeah. You go ahead,
yes,
Jan.
over to you.
Andrew.
Yeah, no, I
Sure.
was just asking you.
Sure. So I would say, look, and thanks to Arvind for pointing out, I think, which is, something that people just sometimes don't see, because I think they just look at the GCC from, just, I mean, the lens that it's an entity in India, which is, which is doing work which is, which pertains to another geography. So, there are no regulations, etc. But like I think Arvind is very beautifully explained. I mean, one needs to see what work it's doing, and one needs to see, basis the fact that, I mean, it may have certain, the entire fact of this work being outsourced to India or the work being done somewhere else could have its own complications. Similarly, I mean, and probably in addition, there could be, other issues as well. So, which could, I think one example I usually always tell people is that there's while of course you can try to insulate a lot of things by doing and ultimately GCC somewhere also de-risks or is it attempt to de-risk this work. But there could be, multiple issues such as, there could be local laws that people have to deal with. There could be, just as an example, which I personally, we saw was, certain states in between came out with regulations which said that, okay, certain jobs now need to be given to people from domiciled in that particular state. So, and while of course that particular point is under challenge, and in most states it's not been successful, but for us it was immediate. It was an alarm bell for us. It made us think twice about those particular states, and while again, it impacted a very limited number of jobs, etc. But just that thought process that, that there could be laws or there could be these kind of measures taken, created an issue for us. So there could be many ramifications and issues and I think concerns which could pop up, and in a country which is so unique, with different governments and different and in multiple uh, ideologies, etc., and different laws being brought in and different, and ultimately a law can be implemented differently across the country. So I think we do see a lot of challenges which are, sometimes difficult to document also, right? So when we report out to our to the various committees that we report to and represent our geography on, sometimes people are sort of surprised to hear the concerns and challenges. But I think that there's definitely much more than meets the eye, right? So then I think as obviously Jayant, somebody who advises companies on these compliance challenges, I'm sure you see that as well. So this is something which is, which each GCC um, has its own issues and challenges to deal with.
But I just want to, hear also your, both of your thoughts, because when I look at, there's a wide range. No two GCCs can be same. While on the face of it may look very similar, but like in case of a knowledge center, you may sometime, I was talking to someone who was running a GCC, who was managing, which was from a large US bank, which is the managing director of this GCC in India. I was talking about as every quarter I was I was in US meeting the regulators because we are processing a lot of the data in India. The credit card data and all everything is in India. Maybe if I'm looking at, I have not thought I would just play some simple look at it. You have to comply with Companies Act, income tax, and all that. But here is the US regulator calling that the head of the Indian GCC every time, every quarter, to sit in front of them and understand how they're complying with the US regulations. This is a very, very wide range. And then you have when you're developing, and Satyajit, is more from your side. I'm saying on one side you do, maybe you are supporting your global clients, you are processing their data. I was talking to somebody who was supporting a social media client. He said, I have one of a social media client in US, and all that when the US elections were there, we had to create a war room because a lot of the data which gets processed here has comes a lot of expectations and regulations suddenly changing in that particular time period. Uh, so it's I think the challenge also what I see is, how do you, if I know, or maybe head of the team knows, but there are 12,000 people, 20,000 people, how do you ensure that it trickles down at the pace, at the speed which regulator expect you to do that? How do you manage those, and how do you know what is the ramification of it for your global counterparts as well?
Right. No, no, absolutely. And I think we will, I mean, that I think is, one of the issues which I'm sure we will talk a lot about in terms of just creating that awareness, right? So, you've really sort of, I would say, found, sort of hit upon a very, very important issue that, I mean, not only do people externally not know the challenges which could come up, but people working in the GCC itself, people who are part of the teams, etc., who are probably, not everybody's legally trained, not everybody's has an awareness of the regulatory landscape, etc. So to expect them to know innately that this is an issue is probably being, ultimately being myopic. I completely agree. But I think there has to be, and I'm sure we will, like I said, we will talk about this as we go on in the presentation. But surely, and very importantly, I think creating that culture and creating that understanding of, that one is, of course, compliance is important, but creating that understanding of, at least at a broad level, of what those regulations are, what those restrictions are, and the fact that not everybody needs to be an expert, but people just need to be able to watch out for warning signs and be able to come and consult with either the general counsel or the compliance leader, whoever, or maybe even their business leaders who have a better sense of what things are, what to do and what not to do. And of course, at probably even a ground level, creating those do's and don'ts for people. I think that's very important, and I think that's something which varies even across GCCs. And we have all come across organizations which have done, very big organizations which have actually been found to have breached very well-known laws around, maybe anti-corruption, etc. And not only in India but in different parts of the world. So it's definitely not something which is rare or it doesn't happen. So I think it's very important to be vigilant and create that. I mean, and that process is constant to ensure that, and we also have to be with probably each company having a different working model, with a lot of talent working remotely, with a lot of people sort of not getting as much initial training and induction times, etc., as people used to have maybe
Yeah.
5-10 years back. There has to be a lot more that we need to do. So I mean, would welcome thoughts from Arvind as well, and then back to you, Jayant.
No, great points, Satyajit. And in fact, I just wanted to add that the it's if you ask me from my personal view, it's kind of a measurement of how evolved a GCC is. You can see that by looking at the processes. Because if you say it's like a very recent GCC without much of a process, it's just like, okay, you want some work has been transitioned to India, and then you do it from India. That's the older model. And during the evolution cycle, how you see this is, for each transition there is some process set around it, and it's not nothing to do with the local compliances, but also to do with, okay, what is the kind of work that is being transitioned? Is this permissible to be outsourced or transitioned to a country like India or a Philippines or any other country which is providing GCC kind of setup? What are the processes around it, and how equipped these teams are to conduct this kind of process? And another aspect is also, if you look at functions like, say, finance, if I take an example on that, um, there might be some functions which are providing some tax or finance related support to outside world, or parent entity or affiliate entities. But in the GCCs there would be a focused L&D team only to provide coaching to finance resources who are inducted. So it would be more so around training and development on internal processes, rather than, we know for a fact that each company has their own learning and development team which provides code of conduct training and other common trainings, but also to provide specific training, functional training to that specific team or function which is providing the support services. I think that is evolving, and as we see going forward, there would be more focused L&D teams which provide these kind of training to say that, okay, here is how I can coach you on FCPA related compliances. Here is how I can coach you around bank related regulations in the US, or tax related aspects of providing services to Europe regions. So I think that's an evolution journey which will come. More GCCs taking these path is something that I'm hoping for. Back to you, Jen.
One quick question on the slide. See, both of you come from larger setups. So the resources are not that much challenging. What about the smaller GCCs? Are there platforms available for them which provide L&D or do a custom training or ready-made trainings on some of these aspects?
I'm not sure on L&D aspects, but I'm sure around the process aspects there are setups which are providing help to these GCCs. So in Bangalore itself, I know of a couple of setups which help GCCs to set up in India. So they provide end-to-end support right from the regulatory aspects of setting up a company, incorporation, and also around processes. And there are platforms which these companies provide, which will help you to, it's like a ready-made platform as a service, where you say that these are the things, the enabling tools or architecture inside these platform will help you design these processes and policies. So I see this area is also evolving, and we would see more companies like this coming up as we see expansion of GCCs around in all places in India.
Right. Great insights. Thank you. So I'll not spend much time on this slide, but more of a a visualization for everyone. Talk about what kind of a laws are applicable on our GCC. So it's while we say GCC is lesser regulated, so it's not pure true so true on when I speak. So every law which is typically applicable on any business, while I would say maybe some very industry specific, barring them, uh, everything is available applicable, from a secretarial to taxation to XM, AML. In fact, there are certain laws which typically are not so much concerned for a normal business in India, like in your SEC laws to your uh, uh, ECB regulations to your prevention of money laundering to anti-corruption Prevention of Corruption Act and all to your custom acts, uh, to maybe some of the social benefits acts, which is like smaller things because the kind of diversified nature of people you have to hire, and more educated talent you have to hire. So you have to keep those diversification in mind, as in line with your global employer as well, and ensure those policies are adopted in India as well. So it's not that the GCCs have to comply with any less. It's equally regulated from the law of land perspective. Any your thoughts of the Arvind?
No, I think, I mean, definitely, obviously, like you said, we don't want to go through line by line this particular sheet, but I mean, I think suffice it to say that probably this is also a cross section of laws. I'm sure there are many more. I think in India, when people try to make exhaustive lists of laws and regulations, it's sometimes a futile affair. But yeah, I mean, you can of course figure out what are the important ones, basis, consequence, and various other tests which you can put. But I think, yeah, I mean, except for a few, um, maybe some regulations which may be a little easier, and of course, in certain states with the incentives, the setup, etc., may be slightly cheaper and easier. I feel GCCs have to go through, almost everything, and day-to-day, challenges that all companies face in India are also, I feel, as much, and in fact maybe more, because I think they do have to also contend with the fact that GCCs typically have to follow their, other than the laws, etc., there are internal policies, internal regulations, codes of conduct. There are certain norms that they can follow. Like, I mean, you can't just do something because you felt like doing it, right? So that's something which folks in GCC have to watch out for.
Yeah. And I would add that, mapping these compliances becomes very crucial, right? Depending on your kind of operations that you have, the kind of setup that you have, how do you map these compliances to say that is something which has been mentioned in the checklist is applicable to you, and when does it get applicable, and what are the kind of compliances? Sometimes it might be something to do with the vendor has to comply with, and you as an organization needs to be responsible to say that the vendor has the respective licenses and approvals to perform certain activity or install certain machine. A case in point I could explain here is something to do with, so if it's a large GCC and now huge number of employees working in an office, there would be some, for safety purposes, there would be a baggage scanner which comes with radioactive emitting materials inside, which would need an approval from Atomic Energy Board. Now, whether the vendor is holding this license while you install this. Now, from a generic point of view, Jayant, your point on somebody speaking of less compliances, you never think of atomic energy getting applicable to a GCC office. But when you have a machine like this installed at the entrance, you need to take that license. So mapping becomes very important, and also it's from a legal point of view. If you ask me from a legal team perspective, the concerned procurement team or admin team who was procuring this, they should also be consulting the legal or compliance team and getting their go ahead before they do any of these kind of things, because unless they inform, the team at the back end would not be aware of certain things are coming into picture. So it becomes a prior engagement is very important. Also, ongoing audit of these kind of compliances plus operation things is very much of importance, I would add.
Right. And just while you were talking, another thought came to mind. Sometimes, and most of the time, say you will have some foreigners operating out of India. There are a lot of compliances which get retracted onto them, which typically one would not even think about,
Yep.
because he is employed here, maybe getting paid here, and maybe getting paid in the country where they are in. And then there are passport acts and immigration and all those acts which gets applicable on them, which one has to be additionally responsible for as well. Right. Okay. Now let's get into nitty-gritty. Is some specific challenges while you were setting up, and I think this some of your learnings would be very helpful for maybe those who are setting up new in India, and who has to deal with some of these complex issues. Specifically, I would say entity formation and structure. What comes to your mind? How you have to be careful about intercompany billings, and a couple of things which are when we were discussing other day. I would want to hear those thoughts on that.
Yeah, maybe I can start off. So from an entity point of registration point of view, I think what you mentioned makes sense, right? Like a public or private limited company, mostly private limited companies are out that we have seen. And basically for the tax related exemptions as well, or the less tax from a LLP structure point of view. But I would add that if a new GCC is getting set up in India, the first and foremost thing is, apart from obviously the compliance which comes without saying that it needs to be complied with, but what I have seen is post few years, maybe like 10 years down the line, the record keeping becomes bigger issue. Like if you have some approvals from RBI, like FDI or FCGPR approvals or things like that, which is very important. Like because tomorrow, if you want to kind of merge or kind of do any action with this entity, the documentation and record keeping is a very important aspect, because sometimes what we see is the teams change, the people change, and then the document is left somewhere in the middle. And when you want to do a merger or a demerger, and that's when all these documents comes in, people comes asking like, hey, where is it, including your share certificate, right? Like recently we had a new regulation which says that mandatorily every share should be in demat form. Now when it is in demat form, that's when you look for your share certificate to say, how do I convert this physical to demat? And therefore record keeping is very important, and there needs to be some process around it. From a billing point of view, yes, especially if you are an SEZ and you have multiple units in India, then each of that unit should have its own individual contract with the parent entity wherein this transitional work is coming, so that you can show that there is the underlying contract on which basis the export is happening from this SEZ unit. Because when you do an SEZ filing, whether it is your monthly reports, like you need to file the soft tax and things, and even if not an SEZ, if you are operating even as an STPI or a non-STPI registered units, you need to have an underlying document. And that's where uh, the document which relates to the specific unit and the export of services is linked. So this intercompany billings and also the transfer pricing things comes into picture. And to add more on transfer pricing as well, it is also important how you arrive at this rates. There are many companies who go for advanced pricing agreements so that they lock up the rates for at least 5 years, and they don't have tax officers visiting asking them to justify the rates of their TP billing back to the parent entity. So it's very important that you scope these activities upfront, because you can't agree on certain activity right at the start and tell the income tax authorities that I'm doing mere back office customer service, and then you end up doing capability services like an AI or something which is more advanced. The rates would differ. So it's very important that from a compliance point of view, everything is matching up to what you present both internally as well as externally to your regulators. Yep, back to you, Satyajit, Ryan.
Right. No, so I think these are great inputs, Arvind, and I would also just sort of add that I think the complexities increase sometimes because different laws have, different thresholds, different definitions. Same, similar terms may have different definitions. So when you are, yeah, and that's across even, let's say revenue laws, tax statutes. So the indirect taxes may have something different. Direct taxes may have something different. So I think it's important to just do this, and of course each team, each department cannot work in, while of course a lot of work they do day to day obviously is something that they're only aware of. But I think the a level of coordination is important, and I think overall uh, collaboration, etc., is very very important in this space, because the consequence of, let's say a wrong filing or a wrong declaration or a wrong classification could be significant. I mean, I don't only mean in terms of financially significant, and it may be, but it could also mean that to correct it becomes very very difficult later. I mean, once a filing is done, it's done. You can't then sort of go and rectify it. Rectification in most cases not allowed, and even if it is, then you have to give a proper justification for it. I think this chart, of course, or the slide obviously deals with them, different set. And I think, some of those bits, I think we mentioned, Jayant, right, initially when we were speaking about tier two cities, we spoke about areas, issues like cultural integration. We spoke about, and maybe in that context, while, um, things like, uh, certain cities have done better than others, has been probably the integration and the sort of the acceptance of these industries and these companies has been more. So I think it's the challenges are many, but I think if we work mindfully and if we sort of just make sure that we coordinate, we collaborate, we see what each department is doing, and we ensure that we work consistently, I think it's something which can be dealt with. And I know that there are cases where we are not able to, because let's say the definitions are different in different laws. But I think if just being aware of what to declare and what not to declare, and how to make sure that we smoothen over those items, and that could be with help of external consultants who have experience doing this, and or sometimes making representations at the right before the right forum. I think those can get sort of dealt with.
I think it. In addition to this, a couple of my personal experiences, I also just want to add. One is uh, your report. Different reporting, because every function, maybe you may have a CEO and a managing director in India, but that may be that the function may not fully report to them. So you will have always have a functional line reporting, dotted line reporting. So your reporting expectations also increase multifold, and everybody expect you to report to them in their own manner. So you will have to understand the criticalities and expectation on those levels, and ensure you are following the expectation from your different leaders sitting in different part of the world. And sometimes they don't understand the local challenges, and some things which at times they are unnecessarily varied also. I was talking to one of the global legal head of one of the GCC. It was like, Jayant, I don't want my global CEO to come to India. I am very scared. The moment he steps to India, he will be jailed because of some non-compliance by entity in India, because he's one of the sending authority also. I think those are some of the misconceptions, I think, which you also have to deal with. And what I also see, intra-departmental dynamics also plays a very important role. Uh, and I, don't without being, without, with no offense to anyone, I would say sometimes what happens is, if it's a very centrally well-controlled organization, uh, it's easy to push few things down and say, okay, it has to happen this way. But if it's a very, uh, I would say, democratic organized setup, where people are empowered to take their decisions, they understand, they understand, they're highly skilled people. These interdepartmental challenges of driving a common goal becomes more challenging, and compliance is something which you cannot be innovative. You have to just follow what you're supposed to follow, and sometimes bringing everyone on the same page becomes a challenging affair as well. So I think those are. And any thoughts how for specifically, I would say the intra-department challenges, how you are dealing, how you've dealt, because sometimes compliance have interdependencies also.
No, I think culture plays a bigger role in this, right? And you touched upon that point as well as Satyajit as well. The culture of compliance, and it has to be set at the top. So the tone at the top should be there on no tolerance or zero tolerance around non-compliance, and that has to get cascaded down. Only then you can depend on other departments for compliance, because if the other departments are not as motivated as you to comply with the laws, you do not have much visibility on what their compliances would be, or how they are doing their compliances, whether they are doing it on time, whether there is any gaps in their compliances. You wouldn't be able to sit in a legal team or a compliance team, and all you can do is on audit, which is again post facto. So I think culture drives this, and how much of a strategy you may have from GCC growth and all that, unless the culture is integrated around compliances, it is very hard for GCCs to be successful, because tomorrow something or the other, some issues would come up, and then you will spend a much more effective time in defending it or litigating it. So it's very paramount. The other aspect would be around, while we are creating processes and procedures around this, it needs to be we need to be mindful that we are not creating something which is highly bureaucratic, to say that for one single thing to move you need 100 approvals to move that. So that also becomes very bureaucratic, and teams would not effectively perform. So it's a balance between how do you manage both sides, and manage the dynamics there.
Right. Very valid points. I think that easy, as easy they sound, it's as challenging when it comes to our day-to-day working. I think we're coming on to the last slide. I think we are already at 5:04. While these are more generic in nature, but want to hear Satyajit from you. What are your key takeaways or maybe tips for someone who is a GC and running an ITS setup or a GCC setup in India? What are things one has to manage and one has to really look forward to?
Sure. So thanks, Jayant. And I think I would say, look, I think it's very important for anyone, right? I mean, and whether that person is GC of a large setup or somebody who's setting something up. I think while the complexities will obviously differ, but I think it's very important to be, to be deliberate, to be mindful of the challenges which are out there. And I think the first, I mean, if I were to, try to put together some steps, maybe not chronologically, but at least as far as I can, sort of believe, they should be done in order of priority. One is, of course, understanding the sector, right? I mean, understanding the business and understanding the work and understanding what the company will be doing and how it's connected to the work that it does and its parent country and jurisdiction is very important. We cannot just be, lawyers or compliance professionals. We understand, our understanding of the business is very important. Two, I think very important that if you're in a sector where, and it's possible, many of us at, different times traverse and, sort of move across sectors. I think it's very important to, if required, consult, external professional or an advisor or an appropriate, experienced sort of consultant if required, just to, even if it's not a regular feature, but at least to get, full understanding of the landscape. And I think finally, making sure that there's, building that culture of collaboration, building that culture of compliance. I think these two are very important because, as one person or as one team, legal or compliance cannot, do everything, right? So we need to make sure that there are, relevant disclosures being done, internally, teams are aware of what, others are doing. And of course, there is a there's a sense, and there's a not only a sense, but I think there's actual transparency on what is being on all elements that need to be both reported and known. So I think I would say, and again, these are also, sometimes when you say it sounds easier than it is. I think there's a lot of work to be done for that. But I think, I think it's very important that it is done in a systematic and a planned manner with adequate time being given to it. Sometimes, we are all running to finish our to-dos and assignments, but I think and to meet deadlines, but I think it's important that we are aware of the uh, complete landscape and the the challenges that we have to deal with.
Right. Arvind, want to hear your
Yeah, I
concluding
think
notes?
sure, Jen. So from my point of view, I think I know most of the points were covered from Satish there, but great points there. One thing that I would add is, while we spoke of GCC strategy, the GCC policy, the state government coming with it, there would be more expansion of GCCs and more GCCs coming our way, which is good for the economy, by the way. Like, a GCC is going to set up a big office, the real estate, the rental yields, the economy supporting it, the all that would grow. But on the other side, we need to be prepared for what more, right? Like if you see the history, it was starting with business processing outsourcing, customer service, some basic data entry, and then it has moved to ITS, support services. Then it has moved to more complex things like AI and engineering. Now what next? So while we do that, I think from a business perspective, the leaders needs to understand what more can be transitioned or carried out from in India, from India or similar GCC countries like Philippines and things. So this awareness needs to be there. Like, what are the trends that are catching up? Climate change is a big thing. So if you are into a fuel manufacturing, or if you are into oil and gas sector, how do you manufacture clean fuel? So something from an engineering point of view, from a research point of view, are there talents in India who can support this, and therefore set up a GCC specifically to cater to these needs? Or if you are from a European entity, there are CBAM regulation which restricts around carbon border adjustment mechanism. What can you do for, if your product is marketed predominantly in Europe, how do you ensure that your product is less carbon emitting product? Can this research be carried out in India? So if there are talents, both from an IT point of view or from an engineering point of view, from a data intelligence point of view, people can support from India. How do you structure these, from a process point of view? Like, what is the law in these countries, which you need to understand? And that, linking back to the point that I was speaking earlier, to say that, are the people equipped to know what kind of law is there, and how are you adjusting it to it, or how much of a learning and development process is in there, how much of a policy and process is there, and therefore provide these services effectively and efficiently to your parent entities or your affiliate entities. And that I would be, that would be something that I would be looking forward as the GCCs evolve to the next stage.
Thank you. And just to add to what you both said, I think very very valid point. It's one has to be very mindful of all that. One this is again with my experience which comes in. See, with the second wave of GCC or ITAs companies, as we saw, there were some very very established names in the first wave. When the second wave came, you saw the uh, the leadership position in all the second wave GCCs or ITs companies was taken over by the second rank people or the third lines from those established players. I think as we are talking about the third wave coming, of GCCs, which is the next 5 to 6 years, Karnataka itself is talking about 500 plus GCCs. I think all the leaders should be mindful of that. There will be more iteration than whatever we have seen in the past, uh, especially in the level 2 and level 3. So when this thing is going to happen, because typically GCCs see, at least on the top levels, you see a lesser iteration. So knowledge base is always there. The organization history is always there with someone. But now the time has come when the talent will have more option. There more competition for the talent, which is going to happen. One has to put a lot of processes and technologies in place to ensure the corporate history documentation, as you said, documentation becomes challenging. These everything is in place, and it is more people dependent. More process dependent and less of a people dependent. And as you have to grow these things, investing in your technology process would come very, very handy uh, for everyone. And maybe again keep ensuring that you have an extra layer always. Sometimes just not looking at internal talent, also looking at talent beyond, also who should be able to support you in terms of your growth or in times of such attritions. Should always be there. Um, if you have any thoughts, I think Trishul, if do you have any question? I saw that you had one slide on some of the questions. You want to pick up? Okay, I think we'll skip this one. I think the second one, we kind of have had one slide talking about, at GCCs, any other business, you have to take registration approvals from any, all the authorities there, whatever comes to your way. Is there any official directory of GCCs available? Please let me know also if something is available. We are also looking at one. How to strike balance between on the ground practice and actual compliance from Indian GCC landscape context? Arvind, you want to pick this one, the number 4?
I think we spoke of that from a cultural point of view, right? Like understanding that, and then the ground practices and actual compliances. Yeah. So it's awareness, right? So it is not just the legal team or the compliance team who's executing this. So it is like, say, for example, if it is something to do with e-waste, there would be an IT team who would be handling these electronic waste items. How equipped are they, or how much do they know of what kind of compliances, what time frame? So this coaching needs to be provided, this clarity needs to be provided. And that's where tools like Lawrbit, I would say, would come into picture to say that there is complete visibility. If you're tagging an item to a particular person in the certain team, that person has visibility to say that, okay, this is something that I have to do, and this is my timeline, and these are the documents that are needed for it. So I guess this is one way to manage the ground practices with the actual compliance.
Right. Thank you. Satyajit, if you could come, pick up the fifth one. What is the Indian GCC is working in metrics model of global projects? India GCC IP protection vis-a-vis other centers outside India working on this type of project.
Right. So I think, look, of course, can have multiple, factually multiple sides to it. But I think, and I think for many years, India has always been panned as, having weak IP protection and all of that. But I think over the last few years, we have seen, right, the IP, sort of enforcement structure in India has improved. I mean, at least that's what that's been the overall trend. And in fact, both in terms of the governmental measures to sort of push for greater registration, etc., by IP, and also enforcement, and in fact how the courts have also been treating IP, and the importance of protection to the IP. I think there's been a lot of work done on that side. So I don't think India GCC IP protection is anyway weaker, comprehensively weaker than other parts of the world. But sure, I think depends on also what kind of work you're doing, right? So India may not be, I think people just assume GCC means India. It may not be the, and that's not only for IP, but because of many reasons, various reasons. One needs to really see whether India is the relevant place for, setting up the GCC for, for the work that I think the question has been asked for. So maybe with some further facts and maybe some more time, we could have gone deeper into this question.
Thank you. how do I think 6th and 7th we kind of briefly touched upon those, but I think there it's something which we can do a webinar on, at least on the point number 7. Yes, I think Indian GCs have taken much more beyond just a cost arbitrage. And as I see, I think one of the slides which you spoke about was talk about how it has changed and what are the different type of GCs. And I think virtually India is doing everything which is required to run our organization or your business effectively globally. Is supporting beyond uh, what the initial mandate of a GCC was, what we knew as a call center to a BPO to an ITS and then a GCC. So these, with the evolution of these terms itself, I think it talks about how the industry has also evolved in those years, right? I think we've come to an end with this. Satyajit, thank you so much for your time today and all your thoughts. I think is quite interesting. A lot of takeaways for me also in person, which I will always cherish. Thank you so much, Arvind. Always great talking to you, and I look forward maybe in doing some more webinars on this topic because I personally feel in the years to come, this is going to expand. We are going to have we're going to look at more GCCs getting set up in India. We're going to have more challenges coming up, and we'll keep talking on it. Look forward to hear more from you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Satyajit.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.